Hello everyone, welcome to Easy Economics. How are you all doing? I hope you all are doing well. Today I brought for you all February March 2021 0455 paper 12. We're going to be doing paper 1 multiple choice. Let's quickly dive what this paper has for us. Alright, beginning with MCQ number 1. Before I proceed, towards my right, you can view this bubble sheet, this answer sheet, which you will be given in order to shade in your responses during your CIAs. And we will also be doing the same. We'll be shading in our responses using this bubble sheet. All right, let's look into MCQ number 1. MCQ number 1 says, Sanjay is a risk taker and sets up a restaurant in Chennai. He works in the business as a chef. He leases the restaurant building from Raghav and employs him to serve the customers. Which income is earned by Sanjay and Raghav? Now, apparently, Sanjay was the owner. So, since he's an entrepreneur, he's a risk taker. But what he does is he is also working. So, what is he doing? He is working for the business as a chef as well. So, at the same time, he's also an entrepreneur and he's also a chef. And Raghav was the person from whom he leased the building. So, apparently, Raghav is going to be getting the rent. But Raghav is also working in the business. How? He's going to be serving the customer. So he's also working as an employee. So again, two incomes will be earned by Raghav and two incomes will be earned by Sanjay. We have to identify what two incomes would be earned by each of them. So now they've given us a table and looking at the description, we've got to identify which two forms of earnings would be enjoyed by each of these two, right? So the first option says Sanjay would be getting interest and profit. No, it cannot be interest. Profit it would be, but not interest. Why? Because he's working as a chef. So a chef would be earning what? Wages. So looking at that description, we can come up to C. But what about Raghav? Raghav would be getting rent and he would be getting wages. Why? Because he was also being employed to serve the customers. So looking at both parts of the table, for MCQ number 1, C is the correct response. Therefore, we'll be shading in C in our bubble sheet. Alright, I hope it's clear. Moving forward, MCQ 2. A government reduces social security spending by $10 billion in order to increase defense spending by $10 billion. So what the government does is stop spending on unemployment benefits in order to increase its spending on defense. So what is actually happening? What is actually happening? The government is reallocating its resources, right? So from spending on unemployment benefits, it's now spending on social, it's now spending on defense. So the resources which the government has, the limited resources, is being swapped, it's being changed. It's not expansionary fiscal policy. It's not related to the market forces, neither it's related to price stability. All of these are incorrect. It cannot be expansionary fiscal policy because over here the government is reducing the social security benefits. It's not expanding, it's in a way contracting in fact. So for 2 we'll shade in B. Let's look at the third one. For this we've been given a table. It says the table shows the maximum production possibilities for goods and services for a country. So now the first part of the table shows what goods and what services can be produced. So now if we look at each of them, the total for each goods and services is coming up to be 100. So 100 millions is actually the total production possibility for both goods and services, right? Now, what are they saying? They're saying the country originally produced only goods. So if it originally produced only goods, it was here. That means it was producing all, using all its resources for the production of goods, and for the production of services, 0 units were being produced. But then what happened? The, gov- the country decided to move on to producing 20 million units of services. So now, if it moves towards producing 20 million of services, now it's producing 80 million of goods. Now, what are they asking? What is the opportunity cost? The opportunity cost is what? In order to produce 20 more of services, it let go or it foregone 20 million units of goods. So 20 million units of goods is the opportunity cost. In order to produce, in order to produce 20 million units of services. So this is the opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is what? The cost of the next best alternative foregone. Right? So what's the choice made? In order to produce 20 million units of services, it had to reduce the production of goods by 20 million. So what did it forego? 20 million units of goods. So that's the opportunity cost. So for 3, we'll shade in A. MCQ number 4. What is included in macroeconomics? Macroeconomics is when we are talking about aggregates, when we are talking about the total economy. So out of these 4 options, there is going to be only one in which you are talking about the entire economy. If you look at A, B, and C, they all are talking about micro. The causes of change in the price of one product, the cause of market failure, the causes of determinants of price elasticity of supply. It's only in D when we are talking about economic growth, when we are talking about the entire economy, when we are talking about the entire country, we're talking about aggregates, right? So for 4, it has to be D. Number 5. What is an advantage of a market economy in the allocation of resources? So when we are talking about market economy and we are talking about resources being allocated, how can market economy be an advantage? It ensures that all consumers are willing to pay the same price? No. Some are willing to pay, some are not willing to pay, not are able to buy. So A is incorrect. B says it fixes prices based on cost of production. No, it fixes what helps in market economy? Consumer sovereignty, right? It's where the demand and the supply meet that determines the price, right? It guarantees suppliers will make a profit, not necessarily. D, it indicates the relative demand for goods and services. Yes, that's the correct answer. So for 5, it has to be D. It's consumer sovereignty that dictates producers what to produce, right? That dictates producers what goods and services are to be demanded. Number 6. Which characteristics of a product will cause market failure? So now what is market failure? When there is inefficiency, right? So information about the product is known equally by consumers and producers. So if the information is going to be known equally, there won't be any market failure. So it's incorrect. The consumption of the product has no external benefits. If the production has no external benefits, so what's going to happen? This means that if it does not have external benefits, but it does, but over here we are talking about market failure, we are referring to the costs. Alright, so if it does not have external benefits, it does not have any negative externalities which are causing market failure. But we're talking about, not talking about external benefits over here. C says the product is non-rival and non-excludable. So if it's non-rival and non-excludable, this means we are talking about a public good. And the characteristic of a public good is that yes, it leads towards free rider problem, right? Since it's has the characteristics of non-rivalry and non-excludability. So the free market underproduces it. That is why it causes market failure. So C is the correct answer. Why it cannot be D? Because in D, the production of the product has no external cost. If it does not have external cost, this means private cost is equals to social cost. So the market is still working efficiently. So we'll chop off D. So for 6, it has to be C. Number 7. The diagram shows the market equilibrium E for the product X. Product X has a downward sloping demand curve. So if it has a downward sloping demand curve, it would be something like this. And it has an upward sloping supply curve. So again, it has to be this. So E is the equilibrium. You can label the diagrams as V and S. Now they say the price of a substitute goods fall. So if the price of a substitute falls, what happens? The demand for that substitute would increase. If the demand for that substitute would increase, what should happen to the price of this product? What should happen to the demand for this product? The demand for this product should fall. So the demand for this product fall, what should happen to the demand curve? Should it move outwards or inwards? Should be moving inwards. Inwards towards what? Left or right? Towards the left. So if it moves towards the left, it's going to be here. So now the question is asking into which area of the diagram is the product moved. Which area did it move? It moved it towards product, towards area. C. See, it moves inwards. From D to it shifted to D1. It shifted inwards. So for 7, we'll shade in C. Don't get overwhelmed by any new question. Break it down, decipher it into small chunks, solve it gradually, and you will arrive at the correct answer. I hope you've understood this MCQ. Number 8. Now, MCQ number 8 gives us a supply schedule. They are asking us to calculate price elasticity of supply. In order to calculate price elasticity of supply, we'll plug in all these figures into the formula and we'll derive at the price elasticity of supply. They are asking what is the price elasticity of supply when the price rises from $1 to $3. Now, what's the formula? Percentage change in quantity supplied divided by percentage change in price. This is equals to what? Price elasticity of supply. So first we'll calculate percentage change in quantity supplied. Percentage change in quantity supplied will be equals to the new quantity supplied was 7 minus the old, which was 3, divided by the initial into 100. So this is going to give us 133.33. What about percentage change in price? Percentage change in price is equals to 3, the new price, minus the old one, initial, which was 1, divided by the initial into 100. Again, it's giving us a 200. So now what we'll do, we'll plug in these two final figures. Percentage change in quantity supplied is 133.33. Percentage change in price is 200. When we'll divide the two, we'll get the figure 0.66. So this means for 8, it has to be B. Right? I hope you've understood. Number 9. Which function does a central bank provide for the general public? So out of these 4 functions, there's only going to be one which is going to be provided by the central bank. The rest would all refer to the functions provided by a commercial bank. So accepting deposits, issuing banknotes, making loans, providing overdraft. Overdrafts, making loans, and accepting deposits are all functions of the commercial bank. It's issuing banknotes. That's the function of a central bank. So for 9, we'll shade in B. Number 10. What might cause a rise in wages? Why do you think there would be a rise in wages? A more elastic supply of labor. If there's a more elastic supply of labor, so the wages should fall and not rise. An increase in the size of labor force, again the wages should fall and not rise. Improve fringe benefits, if benefits are increasing, perks are increasing, so the wages should not be increasing again. This is incorrect. The introduction of a national minimum wage, if the government increases the wage level, so the entire uh, labor force is going to experience a rise in their wages. So for 10, it has to be D. 11. A national trade union wishes to increase the wages of its members without reducing the number of employees. So the trade union wishes to ensure that the members are enjoying a high wages without pressurizing on the workers being laid off. So what factor would help the union to do this? Under what circumstances would the union be able to implement this? When the workers' wages are the largest cost of the industry? No, that's actually a disadvantage. When the union workers have low level skills, so they won't be able to bargain. Again, that's incorrect. When the industry consists of a small number of well organized employers, again, this would be at a disadvantage because then they won't be able to play their part, the union. The demand for the industry product is increasing. Yes, when the industry products are highly in demand, they are going to pressurize the producers that they form an integral part and that their demand must be fulfilled. Therefore, for MCQ number 11, we'll shade in A as the correct response. Moving forward, MCQ number 12. MCQ number 12 gives us the total cost curve. They are asking us, they've displayed cost on the vertical axis, on the horizontal axis, they've displayed output. Now they've given us the total cost figure. What are they asking now? They're asking us what is the average variable cost if the firm is producing an output of OQ. So OQ is the level of output and the total cost is OX. So now if you look at it, OX is the total cost, OW is basically the fixed cost and WX is the variable cost, right? Now they are asking the average variable cost. So average variable cost would be what? Total variable cost upon the output. So what is the variable cost? WX, and what's the output? OQ. So looking at that, what should be your option? C. So for 12, we'll shade in C. MCQ number 13. What will occur when there is a conglomerate merger? So now first we have to identify what is a conglomerate. Conglomerate is when two firms in completely different industries merge. So when two firms in completely different industries merge, what should actually happen? Should there be increased control over supply of raw materials? No, it cannot be A because this occurs in vertical mergers, right? In two related industries. But since they are two unrelated, so they won't have control over the supply of raw materials because it's not the same sources, right? So we'll chop A. B says increase risk bearing economies. Yes, that's correct. Why? Because the loss in one uh, type of industry can be offset by a profit in another, right? Why can't we see reduced marketing economies of scale? Because market economies would remain unchanged, not reduced. It cannot be again D because technical economies are related to production methods. So it's unrelated. So again, it's not going to be affected. So for 13, we'll shade in B. Number 14. What is total revenue? Total revenue is price into quantity. Looking at the definition, it's the price of the good multiplied by the total quantity sold. So for 14, we'll shade in B. Number 15. How would a state-owned oil refining firm be classified? So if it's state-owned, it means it's public sector. If it's oil refining, this means it's not primary. It has already extracted oil and now it's going through a certain process. So it's we're talking about the secondary sector. So it's a public sector firm in the secondary sector. So for 15, it has to be D. All right, moving forward. MCQ number 16. What is included in a government's budget? When we are talking about a government budget, we are talking about the revenue and we are talking about the expenditure. So again, by the definition, it has to be the balance of the government revenue and the government expenditure. So for 16, we'll shade in A. Number 17, a country has rapidly increasing inflation. So if inflation is increasing at a very high rate, what is an example of a monetary policy to reduce this problem? When we are talking about monetary policy, we are talking about money supply and interest rates. So again, looking at that, yes, it's B. Why it can't be C? Because C is saying subsidizing key industries. C is saying introducing maximum prices. A is saying increasing income tax. Income tax is fiscal policy. Here we are talking about monetary policy, so it cannot be A. It cannot be C because C refers to price controls, but here we are talking about monetary policy. Again, it could not be D because D is also related to fiscal policy, but here we are talking about monetary policy. So we'll chop A, we'll chop C, we'll chop D. So by logic and by elimination both, we've arrived at B. That's the correct answer for MCQ number 17. MCQ number 18. What are they giving us? They've given us bar graphs which are showing the allocation of government spending in various areas, in defense, in education, in health, in unemployment. What are they asking? They're asking find out how much is the government spending on merit goods. So what is merit goods? Merit goods are goods on which people tend to spend less because they underestimate the benefits of consuming those goods, and these goods are those which are underproduced by a market economy. So by definition, we know it's education and health. So we'll add in 36.4 billion and $81.8 billion, and the total answer we'll be getting is 118.2 billion. So looking at that, for 18 it would be C. It's education and health. All right, moving forward, MCQ number 19. It shows the CPI of an economy. What can be concluded from the data? Consumer price index. What is consumer price index? Measures changes in the average price level of a basket of goods and services over time, right? So now what is happening? Year 1 was a base year, it was 100, then it went to 101, 104. In year 4 it was 108, in year 5 it was 106. Now what happened? The CPI fell, right? This means what? Inflation was rising, the rate of inflation fell. So when the rate of inflation fell, what happened? The prices fell, right? Prices fell between year 4 and 5. So for 19, it has to be A. Moving forward, it cannot be related to fall in living standards because that's not what CPI shows. The rate of inflation was 5%. That's again incorrect. Prices rose in every year. No, prices did not rise in every year. In year 5, prices actually fell between year 4 and 5. So again, B, C, and D are incorrect. B, B, C, and D are all incorrect. So A is the correct answer for MCQ number 19. Moving forward, MCQ 20. Deflation is a sustained fall in the general price level. What might cause deflation? Now, A says insufficient private capital investment. Insufficient private capital investment is actually when people are actually, it's actually a not a cause, but it's actually when people would be having It's a result of less confidence. Rather than being the cause, it's after having less confidence, then people would be investing less. That is why it can't be A. It has to be B because loss of confidence in government's economic policies is because people are spending and investing less. So a drop in demand would lead to a fall in prices. And people are spending less, investing less, so this drop in demand would lead to a fall in prices. It cannot be A because A is actually a result of the low confidence rather than being a cause. So it cannot be C and D because again they are absurd, resulting oil crisis and shortage of skilled labor. So it has to be B. 21. Tax is charged at 1.45% on all wages earned to pay for basic medical provision. How would this be described? So if the same amount of tax is being imposed, this is what? Direct. Why? Because it's being imposed on wages, it's imposed on earnings, it cannot be indirect. So we'll choose C and D. It has to be direct. So direct and ingressive or direct and proportional? Direct and proportional. Why? Because the same percentage is being paid by everybody regardless or irrespective of their incomes. So it is proportional. The same percentage is being applied on all incomes. So for 21 it has to be A. Moving forward. 22. The table gives us some data about an economy. They've given us the rate of inflation 3.5%, the change in personal income 2.5%. What happened in year one? So the rate of inflation was 3.5, the change in personal income was 2.5%. So your real income actually fell by 1%. So what happened? The real income fell, but the prices rose. So for 22, it has to be D. 23. What is included in the construction of the CPI? CPI measures the changes in average price level of a basket of goods and services over time. So base year gives a point to compare, right? So it has to be the base year. Price elasticity of demand, quantity supplied, incomes, they are all incorrect. So 23, it has to be A. Moving forward, MCQ 24. Which country is likely to have the highest standard of living? So the birth rate, death rate, infant mortality, life expectancy, all four options. So the life expectancy has to be the highest. So we can chop A and B. Both are 79 for C and D. What about infant mortality? Infant mortality means what? The death of children less than 1 year, right? So in which is it is lowest? It's lowest in D. What about the death rate? Again, it's less people, the death rate is low in D. Birth rate is the same. So looking at both the death rate and the infant mortality, for D it's better. So D has a higher living standard. When the death rate is low, there are less children dying when they are less than 1 years of age. The life expectancy is the highest and the birth rate is the lowest. So for 24, it has to be D. Which statement about poverty is correct? Absolute poverty occurs when income falls below what is needed for survival. Yes, that's correct. Absolute poverty is when income is insufficient to meet basic needs such as clothing. B, C, and D are incorrect because B talks about an advanced economy is likely to have a higher level of, because advanced economies have low absolute poverty rather than high. C is again incorrect because relative poverty can increase even if absolute poverty falls. D is again incorrect because relative poverty depends on living standards and not goods. So for 25, it has to be A. Moving forward, the United Nations predicts that the population in low countries will increase. What is likely to be a cause of this? In which situation do you think this would happen? When climatic change would lead to lower output and starvation, it would going to be worsen off. Improved education for girls will lead to small decline in birth rates if the birth rates are declining. So the population would not increase, rather fall. Increasing number of people will migrate, so people are going to migrate, the population is going to fall. Modern medicine and sanitation will lead to a rapid decline in death rate. This is the reason why the population is going to increasing, because healthcare is going to improve. So 26, it has to be D. 27. Which method of trade protection would enable the domestic firms to lower their prices and undercut the price of imported goods? So it's tariff, embargo, and import quota are all going to increase the price of imported goods. So we'll chop all of these of three. It's only in subsidy where the firm would be able to combat against the imported product by undercutting its prices, right? So for 27, it has to be A, because we'll get a question. 28. How an MNC can directly benefit a host country? Creating local employment, depleting natural resources, that's a disadvantage. Importing raw material, again, it's going to be worsening the current account. Receiving tax concessions, not necessarily after receiving tax concessions, it's going to be repatriating the profit or investing again or not. But directly, it's talking about directly, so when it's going to be giving employment, so the standard of living of the people of the domestic country, the host country, is going to rise because the people are going to be earning higher income, the employment level is going to rise, the standard of living would improve. So for 28, it has to be A. 29. A country has a current account deficit. So for current account deficit, this means what? This means imports are greater than exports. So if imports are greater than exports, what happens? How do you want to reduce the deficit? By reducing the imports and increasing exports. So if a country depreciates its currency, what happens? The exports would get cheap and the imports would get expensive. So the deficit would reduce. So a depreciation of the exchange rate would help the country, right? So we'll shade in C. Why it can't be A? It cannot be B, because A and B are all going to increase imports. If interest rates are going to fall, people are going to be spending more on imports. If the rate of income tax is going to fall, again disposable income is going to increase, people are going to be buying imports, so it's going to worsen of the deficit. If the government again going to increase expenditure, again it's going to be spending on imports, it's going to be spending, so the demand would increase, so again imports can increase. So in A, B and D are all going to worsen of the scenario. So it's C which is going to improve. The last MCQ number 30. A country experiences a deficit on each of its trade in goods, primary income and secondary income. Overall, it still managed to have a surplus on its current account. How was it possible? The balance of trade on goods was negative, primary income was negative, secondary income was negative. We are left with one thing, balance of trade in services. So this means what? Balance of trade in services must have been positive enough. That is why, in spite of having all these three heads negative, all these three components negative, the country still managed to have a surplus. How was this possible? This means that the surplus in trade and services must be large enough to offset the deficit in all these three components. So for 30, we'll shade in B as the correct response. All right. I hope you understood and enjoyed solving these MCQs with me. Stay tuned, subscribe. I'll be back with more such papers for you. Happy learning.